you absolutely sure that before you locked your front door tonight, someone didn't already slip inside? Tonight, I'm bringing you 3 terrifying true stories. In our first, a woman listens in horror as her locked security system announces that her front door has just been opened. In our second, a deranged psychopath waits right outside a bathroom door with a massive kitchen knife. And in our final story, a girl makes the horrifying discovery that a man has been living inside her ceiling right above her bed for weeks. Plug in your headphones, lock your windows, because tonight you aren't getting any sleep. Back in 2023, I experienced one of the most unnerving and terrifying nights of my entire life. To this day, I can't logically explain what happened. I've never liked staying home alone, but after that night, I don't think I've ever stayed overnight anywhere by myself since. At the time, my fiancé, Ryan, and I were looking to buy a house. Our apartment lease had just expired, and we didn't want to lock ourselves into another full year of renting. That's when a perfect opportunity seemed to fall right into our laps. One of my dad's oldest friends owned a house in a beautiful area of town. It had just become available because the previous tenants had passed away. Because my dad was so close to the owner, he agreed to let us stay there for an incredibly cheap rate on a month-to-month basis. It took a massive amount of house hunting stress off our shoulders. But there was a catch, one that sat very heavily in the back of my mind. I wasn't thrilled about moving into a house where both of the previous residents had died inside the home within just a few weeks of each other. Granted, they were elderly, so it wasn't a violent crime or anything malicious, but still, the thought of it gave me a terrible feeling. Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't bothered at all. He was just thrilled about the low price tag. He's not the type of person to believe in bad energy or anything paranormal, but I most definitely am. I remember when we first moved in, he would constantly mock me for being jumpy. He'd even go as far as mimicking ghost sounds just to mess with me. Don't get me wrong, Ryan is a great guy, but he's always joking around, sometimes to a fault. When we first unpacked our things, the house had this awful, stained tan carpeting all throughout the rooms. The owner told us he was sending someone over to tear it out and put down hardwoods. On the very first day, Ryan noticed a massive dark stain right in the middle of the living room carpet. He asked the owner where it came from. The answer we got was information I deeply wish I had never heard. The owner explained that the elderly woman had taken a bad fall, struck her head violently on an end table, and that dark stain was from her blood. She was rushed to the hospital that night, but unfortunately, she never came home. Then he casually added that her husband had passed away just a few weeks prior. He suffered a massive heart attack down in the basement. I was utterly horrified to be living there, but sometimes you have to do what is financially smart, and this was it. Within 2 days, the carpets were gone, the walls were freshly painted, and the house actually started to feel cozy. The owner even installed a modern security system. Every time a door opened, a loud automated electronic female voice would announce, "Front door, open." It got annoying very fast, but admittingly, it made me feel a lot safer. A little over a month went by, and the house finally felt like a home. Then came the weekend Ryan had to leave for his bachelor party. I was on edge about being alone for a couple of nights, but I had the company of our cattle dog, Rex. Rex was a great guard dog, very protective, but incredibly quiet. He rarely ever barked. On Friday, July 7th, I kissed Ryan goodbye in the morning and headed for work. When I got home that evening, the house felt strangely empty. I ordered some Thai food, turned on The Office, and tried to lose myself in my favorite feel-good show until I started getting tired. It was close to midnight when I heard it, a weird, distinct scratching noise coming from the basement door. I tried to tell myself it was just an old house creaking, but then Rex suddenly bolted from the couch, ran straight to the basement door, and began barking frantically. His posture was completely rigid. He sounded tense, terrified, and aggressive all at once. I tried to console him, petting his back, but he wouldn't calm down. My heart was pounding in my throat. Slowly, reluctantly, I reached out, turned the doorknob, and cracked the basement door open. I flipped on the light switch. Rex instantly stopped barking and dropped into a low, menacing growl. I took one step toward the stairs, intending to look down, when suddenly it flashed through my mind. This is exactly where the old man died. A wave of absolute dread washed over me. I froze at the top of the stairs, completely paralyzed by fear. It was too dark to see past the first few steps. I pulled out my phone and took a photo with the flash on, trying to see into the darkness below, but the image just showed pitch black shadows. With Rex completely losing his mind beside me, I slammed the door shut, locked it, and retreated to the bedroom. Eventually, Rex calmed down and joined me on the bed, but he didn't sleep. For the rest of the night, he sat at the foot of the bed, his eyes locked onto the bedroom door, completely alert. I slept horribly, waiting for the door to burst open at any second. The next morning, I tried to shake off the paranoia with a cup of coffee. I decided to distract myself by doing chores. I gathered a large pile of laundry and walked down the hall to the laundry room. When I stepped inside, I froze. What I saw might seem trivial to some people, but it chilled me to the bone. Our washing machine was a massive, incredibly heavy unit, but right then it was sitting several feet away from the wall, nearly in the exact middle of the utility room. It hadn't just vibrated out of place, it had been forcibly moved. I backed out of the room immediately, my mind racing, trying to figure out how or why this could happen. When I finally gathered the courage to go back in, everything else seemed untouched. I grabbed the sides of the heavy machine and pushed it back against the wall. It required a massive amount of physical effort. There was no way that machine could have moved silently, yet I hadn't heard a single sound during the night. I called Ryan and told him everything. I could tell he was skeptical, trying to find a logical explanation for it all, but he was genuinely concerned for me. He promised that he and his friends would pack up early and head home first thing in the morning, rather than late Sunday afternoon. Saturday night played out much like Friday. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket with Rex, with the TV volume turned all the way up to drown out the silence of the house. At exactly 9:18 p.m., a loud, violent noise echoed from outside. It was massive, loud enough to make me jump right off the couch despite the blaring TV. It sounded like an explosion right in our driveway. A second later, my phone vibrated, a notification from our garage security camera. With trembling fingers, I opened the live feed. What I saw made no sense. Our garage door was wide open in the video. We never used the garage door. We both drove large vehicles and only used the space for extra storage. In the footage, bright flashes of light were reflecting on the concrete driveway, accompanied by loud popping sounds that sounded exactly like fireworks. Holding my breath, I unlocked the interior door that led into the garage and peered out into the driveway. Nothing. No smoke, no smell of sulfur, no debris, and absolutely no sign of fireworks. The night was completely still. I manually closed the garage door, locked it, and went straight to the bedroom. My heart was racing. My brain was completely overloaded because I couldn't figure out what I was actually dealing with. Was there something insidious in this house that I couldn't see, or was an actual person outside actively tormenting me? I checked the security system 3 separate times to ensure it was armed. Just like the night before, Rex stood guard at the foot of the bed, staring blankly at the door, occasionally letting a quiet growl slip from his throat. Eventually, sheer exhaustion took over, and I drifted off to sleep. I woke up with a violent start. Someone was pounding on the front door with terrifying force. I checked the time on my nightstand. It was 3:39 in the morning. The heavy, continuous banging didn't stop. It wasn't a normal knock. It sounded like someone trying to break the door down with their bare hands. I was completely paralyzed in bed, too terrified to move a muscle. And then, just as I gathered the courage to slide out of bed, a loud, clear, automated voice echoed through the dark, empty house. Front door open. My heart stopped. Someone was inside the house. I bolted out of bed, slammed my bedroom door shut, and locked it. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Every time I pressed the power button, the backlight would flash, but the screen remained completely black. It had totally glitched out. That was the exact moment I broke down and started sobbing. And then the ultimate terror began. Right before my eyes, in the faint light of the bedroom, I watched the doorknob begin to violently shake and rattle. Someone was standing right on the other side of the wood, trying to get in. "Go away! Get out of here!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. Somehow, using a backup landline in the room, I finally managed to connect with the police. I hysterically told them someone had broken into my house and was trying to get into my bedroom. The next story. I used to live right next door to a local dive bar, and honestly, I absolutely hated it. Thankfully, it wasn't right against my property line. There was a thick row of trees running along the edge of the lot that gave me a decent amount of privacy. But if I looked out from a specific angle in my driveway, I could see right onto the side patio of the bar. That patio was where everyone went outside to hang out and smoke. Most of the time, it wasn't unbearable. But on the weekends, or whenever the local sports team was playing, which felt like every other day, it was a nightmare. To make matters worse, at the time of this story, I was working in retail. That meant I had to work early shifts on most weekends. So while they were living it up and partying loudly next door, I was in my bed, covering my head with a pillow, desperately trying to get some sleep.
Out of all the frustrating, sleepless nights I dealt with, and believe me, there were many, one specific Saturday night stands out. It's a night that will probably haunt me for the rest of my life.
It was a chilly Saturday night, and my best friend Leela was coming over to hang out. Leela is like a sister to me. We've been best friends since elementary school, and we're still incredibly close today. Around this time, Leela had made it her personal mission to set me up with anyone she could find. This was kind of right before dating apps became the norm. To be honest, dating apps probably would have helped me break the ice because I am an incredibly awkward and introverted person. The mere thought of walking up to a random stranger at a coffee shop and asking her out seemed more terrifying to me than the plot of any horror movie you could think of. I'm a massive dork, and I love that about myself. I love my comic books, my collectibles, and more than anything, just relaxing in the comfort of my own home. But it's pretty hard to meet people when being a homebody is the biggest part of your identity. Because of that, Leela was trying to be the ultimate wingman. It wasn't going well. I'd been on a few blind dates, but there was never any spark. So, on this particular night, Leela came over for dinner. We ordered pizza and just chilled for a few hours until her girlfriend got off her night shift. We had a great time, and she gave me some of her classic Leela-approved dating advice to try out on my next attempt. Around 10 p.m., her girlfriend called to say she was leaving work. I walked Leela out to her car, hugged her goodbye, and watched her drive away down the road. As I turned around to head back to the porch, a sudden burst of loud laughter erupted from the bar next door. I glanced over through the trees and saw a group of maybe 7 or 8 girls. They were clearly drinking, feeling good, and talking loudly. In the quiet night air, I could hear every single word they were saying. I shook my head, smiling slightly at the chaos, and was just about to step back inside my house when I noticed something off. One of the women in the group was staring directly in my direction. I quickly looked over my shoulder to see if there was someone else behind me she could have been looking at, but my yard was completely empty. It was unmistakable. She was staring right at me. I didn't react. I just stood there, paralyzed by my own social awkwardness. A moment later, the group of girls started heading back inside the bar, but this particular woman stayed back. It was strange. The way she was acting made it seem like she wasn't actually part of their group, even though she had been standing right next to them. Then she raised her hand and waved. There was literally no one else around, so she had to be waving at me. I hesitated, not waving back at first, but then her waves became much more aggressive, almost frantic. Feeling uncomfortable, I reluctantly gave a small wave back. The moment I did, she smiled widely, raised her hand to her lips, and blew a kiss straight in my direction. I forced a polite, awkward smile, turned around and went inside, locking the door behind me. I figured she was just a patron at the bar who had had a few too many drinks. Since I actually had the weekend off for once, I decided to shake off the weird encounter, head over to my setup, and play some video games. I couldn't think of a better way to spend my night. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I heard it. A soft, gentle knock at the front door. I paused my game. The house was dead silent. A few seconds later, I heard the faint knock again. Honestly, I wasn't that freaked out. Because of how close I lived to the bar, I've had drunk people show up on my doorstep before. Some people in this town really like to party hard, and I was used to weird things like this happening.
Just in case it was something serious, I quietly got up from my chair and walked over to the front door. I peeked out of the small window right next to the frame. Nobody was there. The porch was completely empty. Seeing this pretty much confirmed my theory. It was just some idiot from the bar playing a stupid prank and running away. My heart was racing a little bit, just because hearing a knock at that hour is always a jarring experience, but I shrugged it off. I didn't get back on my game, though. Instead, I sat down in the living room and started reading an article on my laptop. About 15 minutes passed. For some reason, a strange feeling of unease was brewing in my stomach. I got up to look out the window one more time, just to satisfy my paranoia and confirm nobody was lurking outside. When I looked through the glass, the porch was still empty, but as my eyes scanned the driveway, my breath caught in my throat. The interior dome light inside my car was turned on. I focused a little harder, squinting through the darkness, and realized that my driver's side door was slightly ajar. At this point, I wasn't scared, I was furious. This wouldn't be the first time a drunk person from the bar tried to break into my car to look for loose change or valuables. The joke was on them because I never kept anything valuable in there. But the last time this happened, the dome light stayed on all night and completely drained my battery. I wasn't about to let that happen again. I unlocked the front door, stepped out into the chilly night air, and marched down the driveway toward my car. Before closing the door, I leaned in and checked the back seat, making sure nobody was camping out back there. Once I saw the car was empty, I slammed the door shut, locked it with my key fob, and headed back inside. The moment I stepped inside and locked the deadbolt, my nose caught a strong whiff of something. It was a very distinct smell, like a heavy, sweet lavender perfume. My first thought went to Leela, but Leela isn't the type of person to wear perfume, and even if she did, there was no way the scent would have lingered in the air for over 3 hours. Then I figured that whoever had knocked on my door earlier must have been wearing way too much perfume, and the scent was just lingering on the front porch, wafting inside when I opened the door to check my car. I finished up what I was doing on my computer, shut down my video game, and decided it was finally time to head to bed. I still felt a little anxious about the car, but I wasn't truly afraid. I crawled into bed, pulled up a movie on my phone, and waited to drift off to sleep. I don't know exactly how much time had passed, but suddenly a sound cut through the audio of my movie. I immediately paused the video so I could hear better. It sounded like someone was running around the house right outside my bedroom door. They were light, delicate footsteps, but they were moving incredibly fast. I slid out of bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, and crept closer to the bedroom door to listen. And that's when I heard it. It was a soft, distinctly feminine giggle. Hearing that giggling combined with the unmistakable sound of someone sprinting through my house threw me into a state of pure panic. I quietly but quickly closed my bedroom door, locked it, and immediately called 911. I told the dispatcher that someone had broken into my house, likely a regular from the bar next door, and that I was trapped in my bedroom. While I waited for the police, every single minute felt like an hour. Eventually, the running and the giggling stopped completely. The silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't just sit there like a sitting duck anymore. I quietly crept over to my closet, grabbed one of my dad's old iron golf clubs, and gripped it tightly. I unlocked my bedroom door, opened it slowly, and began walking through the pitch-black house.
When I reached the entrance of the kitchen, I froze entirely. Standing right in the middle of my kitchen was a small blonde woman. Her back was turned to me, and she was staring intently out the window into the darkness. She was wearing a filthy, tattered pink sundress. And then a horrific realization hit me. This was the exact same woman from the bar Perio who had waved and blown a kiss at me earlier that night. Before I could even open my mouth or react, she spoke. Without turning around, still staring directly out the window, she said in a calm, sing-song voice, "Hey, buddy, I know you're there." The second the words left her mouth, she snapped her head around with terrifying speed, locked her bloodshot eyes on mine, and sprinted directly at me. I let out a terrified scream, dropped the golf club, and ran for my life. I bolted into the nearby bathroom, slammed the door shut, and threw the lock. Within a second, she began violently pounding on the bathroom door, crying and begging me to open it, screaming incoherent sentences. It wasn't long after that the flashing blue and red lights illuminated the windows. The police had arrived. I heard them kick the front door open and shout their compliance commands. I finally unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out, seeing only the police officers standing in the hallway. But as I walked out, I looked down at the floor right outside the bathroom door. Resting on the hardwood floor was one of my heavy steak knives from the kitchen block. She had been standing right outside the door waiting for me with a knife. After securing the house, the police and I went over to the bar to ask the owner if he recognized anyone fitting her description. The owner knew exactly who she was. He told us she was a severely unstable homeless woman who frequented the area. That night, she had been heavily under the influence of something, trespassing and bothering the guests on the Perio, which is why he eventually threw her out. When he threatened to call the cops on her, she disappeared into the tree line. Thank God I never saw her again after that night. I spent weeks trying to figure out exactly how she managed to get inside my house. The only window of time that made sense was when I went outside to check on my car door. She must have been hiding in the pitch-black shadows right next to my porch bushes, and the moment I walked down the driveway to look at my car, she silently slipped through my open front door and hid inside. I'll never forget that night as long as I live. Luckily, the police arrived just in time, and I'm here to tell the story. I just hope that woman eventually got the professional help she desperately needed, and that she isn't still out there terrorizing innocent people in the dark.
The next story. I've spent most of my life being alone. And honestly, that's not a knock on my family or any of my past relationships. It's just that, for as long as I can remember, I have always thrived in isolation. Whenever I dated someone, I usually ended up breaking off the relationship before things got too serious. This isn't a pity party either. That was just the way I liked it. Being on my own allowed me to focus entirely on myself, and because of that, I was able to build my own company from the ground up and find a lot of success. My job allowed me to travel all over the world and meet people from every imaginable walk of life. Basically, I work as an interior decorator. I meet with high-end clients, talk about ways to design their spaces, and help them achieve their aesthetic vision. I'm currently in my mid-30s, and for the first time in my entire life, I have a roommate. Last year, something happened to me in my own home, and now I never want to be left alone in a house ever again. Here is why. Years of grinding and saving every penny finally allowed me to buy my absolute dream home. I moved into the house about 6 months before the events of this story took place. By this point in my career, I was fortunate enough to be able to pick and choose my clients due to the high demand. But despite the success, I still spent an immense amount of time working. Unless I was traveling to meet a client, I did almost all of my drafting and designing right from my home office on the main floor. A few months after moving in, I started hearing a weird noise while working in my office. I didn't hear it all the time, just occasionally. The best way to describe it is that it sounded like a faint, brief shuffling. I know that's vague, but that's exactly what it was. Imagine the sound of someone gently sliding a heavy cardboard box across the floor in the room right above you. The shuffling was always quick, but it was loud enough to completely break my concentration whenever it happened. The first few times I heard the noise, I just ignored it and went back to my blueprints. But once it started happening semi-regularly, I couldn't brush it off anymore. One afternoon, when the strange shuffling echoed through the ceiling, I stopped working and went upstairs to investigate. I remember standing completely still in the upstairs hallway, holding my breath, trying to catch any faint sound. But there was nothing, just me standing in a quiet house. I honestly felt like I was losing my mind. I'd hear the noise, drop my pencil, run upstairs, and find absolutely nothing. Once I proved to myself that there wasn't a physical intruder walking around on the second floor, I came up with a logical explanation. It had to be squirrels. They must have gotten into the siding or under the roof. Growing up, a family of squirrels had nested under the roof of my parents' house, and the scratching kept me up for weeks. Anyone who has dealt with this knows how much of a pain it can be, not just because it's annoying, but because of the structural damage they can cause. Once I had this squirrel revelation, my mind was at peace for a bit. I figured I'd just call an exterminator whenever I found a free afternoon. The noise continued for a few more days. Every time I heard that familiar shuffle, I would write myself a sticky note to remind me to call pest control. But I had so many other things on my plate that calling someone to deal with squirrels was the least of my concerns. A few nights later, I ended up working much later than I usually did. I didn't shut down my computer and crawl into bed until well after 2 a.m. As I lay there in the pitch-black room, trying to drift off to sleep, I heard the shuffling sound again. This was the first time I had ever heard it at night. I tried to close my eyes and ignore it, but this time the sound was different. Usually it was a quick, sudden shuffle and then silence, but now it sounded like continuous, slow movement. It annoyed me enough that I actually got out from under the covers, stood on top of my mattress, and pressed my ear directly against the drywall of the ceiling. The moment I did, the shuffling stopped, but what I heard next was infinitely worse.
I swear to you, I could hear the faint, ragged sound of someone breathing. Just thinking that seemed completely ridiculous to me. But then a terrifying thought crossed my mind. My house had a crawl space in it, essentially a tiny, unfinished attic. The crawl space was incredibly small and difficult to access, so I had never used it for storage.
It suddenly dawned on me that this crawl space was located directly above my master bedroom. I was completely frozen. If that really was breathing that I was hearing, I didn't want to think about what that actually meant. Deep down, I tried to force myself to believe it was still just a large animal. I hyped myself up to at least open the hatch and look. There was a pull-down string on the hallway ceiling that released a folding wooden ladder leading into the crawl space. The string was secured pretty high up next to the linen closet. Since I'm on the shorter side, I had to grab a dining chair from downstairs just to stand on it and reach the string. I grabbed the cord and pulled down hard. It was jammed tightly, but after a firm yank, the hatch creaked open and the wooden ladder unfolded. My hands were shaking as I slowly climbed up the rungs. All I intended to do was poke my head up there and shine my phone flashlight around. I didn't realize how truly terrified I was until I was actually at the top of the ladder. I peeked my eyes over the ledge. It was freezing cold, pitch black, and empty, except for two massive wooden support beams running down each side of the roof. After a quick, frantic glance, I scrambled back down, slammed the hatch shut, and tucked the string away. I was completely freaked out. I went downstairs into the living room, turned on the TV, and sat on the couch. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept playing a horrifying loop of someone hiding just out of sight behind one of those giant wooden beams. At least with the TV on, the background noise could distract my thoughts. Eventually, my eyes grew heavy and I started to doze off. While I was drifting in and out of a light sleep, the sharp, distinct sound of a door creaking open jolted me awake. The sound was so real and jarring that I instantly bolted off the couch, my eyes scanning the living room. I didn't see or hear anything at first. I took a few quiet steps out of the living room and into the kitchen. Everything looked normal. I walked out of the kitchen and faced the long, dark hallway that led to the back of the house where my office was. Since the hallway was pitch black, I reached out and flipped on the light switch. I half expected to see someone standing at the very end of the hall, staring back at me. Once the light flooded the corridor, it was completely empty. I was so incredibly on edge by this point. I slowly walked down the hall, checked my office, and found everything exactly as I had left it. After finishing my frantic search downstairs, I made my way back up the stairs, and the moment I reached the top landing, my heart dropped into my stomach. The pull-down string for the crawl space ladder was hanging completely loose, dangling down into the middle of the hallway. And even more terrifying, it was slowly swaying back and forth. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination or that a draft had caught it. I was positive that I had secured that string when I closed the hatch earlier because of how terrified I had been. But my brain desperately tried to rationalize it, telling me that maybe, just maybe, I had been careless in my haste. As I walked down the upper hall toward my bedroom, I noticed that my bedroom door was almost completely shut. I always leave it wide open. When I reached out and grabbed the doorknob to push it open, the hinges let out a loud, heavy creak. I felt a wave of cold sweat break across my skin. This was the exact same creaking sound that had woken me up from the couch just minutes ago. I flipped on the bedroom light, and the room looked exactly how I had left it. Just as I was about to turn around and leave to grab my keys, I noticed something strange on the hardwood floor right next to the nightstand. It looked like a small, fresh clump of wet dirt and mud. I stepped closer to the bed, bending over to inspect it. I dropped down onto one knee to get a closer look at the debris, and right there from my position on the floor, that raspy, heavy breathing sound echoed right next to my ear. Driven by pure, unfiltered adrenaline, I dropped down even further and looked completely underneath the bed frame. Lying flat on his stomach in the dark space beneath my bed, staring directly into my eyes, was a middle-aged man. I let out a blood-curdling scream and fell backward onto my palms, scrambling away across the floor. The man didn't crawl out, but he opened his mouth and shouted in a bizarrely calm, echoing voice, "Hi, Julie, it's okay." He knew my name. I tried to scramble to my feet to run, but in that moment of absolute terror, my legs felt like moving through quicksand. As I finally forced myself up, he just kept yelling from beneath the frame, over and over again, "It's okay, it's okay." I sprinted down the stairs, snatched my phone and my keys from the counter, flew out the front door and got into my car. I put the vehicle in reverse and tore down the driveway. There was a 24-hour diner located about 2 miles from my house. I drove there like a maniac, ran inside in a state of complete hysterics, and begged the staff to help me. I called the police, and they sent a patrol car to the diner to secure me, while 3 other units rushed over to my house. By the time the officers breached the home, the man was long gone. They searched the entire property thoroughly and didn't find him, but when they crawled up into the attic space above my room, they found his nest. Hidden behind one of those massive wooden support beams were several empty bottles of water, food wrappers, and a small pillow. He had been living up there, right above my head, for God knows how long. I ended up staying at a local motel for almost a month. I was completely terrified to step foot back inside my own home. I spent thousands of dollars installing an industrial-grade home surveillance and security system after that. It's been a year now, and that intruder has never resurfaced. The police never caught him. I don't know where he went, but I know he's still out there somewhere, lurking in the dark. I do have a terrifying theory as to who it was. Years ago, my dad had an old family friend whom he had to completely cut off and threaten with a restraining order because the man had developed a deeply inappropriate obsessive attraction towards me. I think it was him, just a much older, more disheveled version. But if it wasn't him, then whoever that man was, he knew my name, he knew my schedule, and he found a way inside my house to live right above my bed. I learned the hard way that sometimes even locking your doors isn't enough if someone truly wants to get inside.